Yeah, so we'll go ahead now and move to our next topic, which is Colby is going to give us the rundown. There was a pretty massive U.S. aid package announced. It's all very complicated. We're just going to let Colby kind of break down what the contents were and kind of what the deal is there. So I'll turn it right over to you, Colby.
Thank you. So we had a busy week with a lot of new commitments from the United States, totaling over $8.3 billion worth of new security assistance to Ukraine. So just do kind of a brief overview of what those commitments actually entail. And then if people have any questions, always happy to answer those. So the first thing that happened was on this past Wednesday, we had a new drawdown from Department of Defense inventory. So that was worth $375 million. And that had been initially reported back on the previous Friday. I think the media began talking that could be coming pretty soon. But they held it throughout the week, or over the weekend, and then into the middle of the week, and finally announced it on Wednesday when Zelensky was in the United States. So that package was kind of the usual list of ammunition that we are accustomed to seeing Ukraine receive for the past many months now. But there was one new thing in there which got a fair bit of attention, which is that they're going to provide Ukraine with the JSOW glide bomb as well, which is Ukraine already operates small diameter bomb, obviously, and JDAM-ER. Those are both glide bombs as well. But they're going to get JSOW as well. So that's a third glide bomb that will be made available for the Ukrainian Air Force. So that's a new munition that they're going to receive. And then the package also included at least 150 M11-17 armored security vehicles and 9 M60 armored bridging tanks as well. And then just all the usual ammunition, more ammo for HIMARS and M270, artillery ammunition, various anti-tank missiles, etc. And apparently there was also additional MRAPs and light tactical vehicles, which may be Humvees or something else. So that was the drawdown on Wednesday. That was worth $375 million. And then on Thursday, we had two other large announcements. So the first, I guess I'll talk about the other drawdown first. So after that Wednesday drawdown, there was still quite a bit of drawdown authority remaining available. $5.5 billion in drawdown authority still available. And all that was subject to expiry at the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of this month, September. October 1st marks the beginning of the new fiscal year in the United States. So all of that authority was going to expire if it wasn't utilized or directed. So the president announced that they were going to make use of all that authority, send a notice to Congress as they're required to under law, and that will give them the ability to still use all that authority that's remaining. So it won't expire anymore. So there's $5.5 billion worth of equipment that can still be sent to Ukraine. And it seems that they do intend to try and execute all of that before the end of the president's term. Remains to be seen, whether that will actually happen as they intend. But that's what it seems, that there was a statement from U.S. State Department that they plan to continue to execute that in the coming weeks and months. And there were some of the other statements from the White House kind of indicate that seems to be what the plan is. But we'll have to kind of just wait and see on that. They didn't announce yet what is going to be coming in that remaining $5.5 billion, other than there will be another Patriot battery, apparently, which they're going to provide by refurbishing some of the assets that they have in deep storage, that Ukraine can be given a third Patriot battery from the U.S. Army. But still not too much in the way of details on when that might happen and what else might be provided to Ukraine. But legally, they have to tell Congress right now what they plan on sending to Ukraine with all that $5.5 billion worth of authority, but it's not been made public at this stage. So we'll see how, again, that unfolds in the final months of President Biden's term, if they are able to get everything delivered to Ukraine in that time frame, because it's quite a lot, and they've never really announced anything close to this. Back in January 2023, there were a couple of very large drawdown announcements back then, which was just over $5 billion in total. So this is even larger than that. But with any sort of huge announcement like this, it's going to take a lot of time to get everything delivered, because they've also been saying that, they're starting to run low on their stocks for a lot of different things. So even though they have all that authority available, the question is, do they have the things materially on hand that can be transferred to Ukraine in the next few months? So we'll see how that plays out. And then, so the third component of all this is that they made a new Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative commitment for $2.4 billion. And this was also kind of light on details, but they said that there was going to be more ammunition and support for Ukraine's air defenses. So presumably there's just going to be more Patriot missiles, more AMRAAMs for NASAMS air defense systems as well. Perhaps other things, but they didn't specify. So there's that. There's also unspecified air-to-ground munitions. So unclear if that's referring to more JSOWs that they're going to order from Raytheon or a different weapon system. That's unclear. Could really be anything. It could be more JDAMs, could be small diameter bomb, could be anti-radiation missiles theoretically. So a bunch of different possibilities with that. So we don't know. And then there was a bunch of both counter UAS systems and additional UAS as well for Ukraine was the majority of the package, and just a bunch of ancillary stuff. So all in all, quite a large commitment, but we shouldn't expect that there's going to be too much of an immediate surge right now. They have that first drawdown will be flowing fairly quickly, but for the rest of the stuff, all the USAI commitments have to be contracted and then built. So pretty much all of that is going to be fairly long-term stuff, except for in rare occasions where they're buying something that's readily available from industry or buying something off of a partner country. And it's unfortunate that the USAI package didn't seem to include any artillery ammunition, because that's one thing they could do is use that money to go to the Czech initiative and buy some ammunition off of the global market. But the Biden administration has chosen not to take that route. So there won't be any additional ammunition, artillery ammunition coming to Ukraine via that mechanism from the United States. So they're buying other stuff with this. So that's all pretty long lead time. And then, as I said, for the rest of the drawdowns that are coming, we'll see if they can manage to execute that all over the next few months up until the end of January, when the inauguration for the next president will be. I suspect that the outcome of the election in November will probably inform their decision making about how quickly they want to try and deliver all this equipment to Ukraine. So we'll see how that unfolds over the next month and a bit. How the pace of deliveries or pace of further announcements, sort of, if they give any indication about when sort of that authority, if they're going to do announce tranches and kind of tell us publicly what they're sending, or if they're just going to kind of keep that secret and only Congress will be provided with the details. So that's basically the state of what happened over the last week in U.S. aid. A lot of information that it's all on my feed as usual. As soon as things break, I post it on Twitter, so people can look there for more information, and happy to take any questions if there's anything that I didn't explain adequately.
Yeah, thanks, Colby. Real quick, I'd be remiss to ask, did you publish anything for the Insider recently?
Yes, a couple weeks ago now, I guess, or I posted a thread summarizing my latest piece a week ago, Monday, I think it was. So yeah, that was written on this same topic, basically about what we might expect to happen with the remaining aid available to Ukraine, and the situation that prompted them to notify all that remaining authority to Congress, because they had initially asked Congress to just extend the period of the authority being valid for into the next fiscal year, but Congress did not do that. So they instead had to go with this sort of plan B, where they announced that they're going to execute the authority so that it doesn't expire in a couple days. So yeah, people can check out thanks for it's up on the screen now. Thank you for that, Erland. And people can read that or read the thread that I posted summarizing that.
Yeah, and I guess my other question before we get to the audience is, how serious would you say the stocks issue is? I know it's kind of a big question. It kind of depends on which system and whatnot. But like, I mean, is the kind of big picture? Is there efforts being taken to remedy it? Is there alternatives we could look at? I mean, how big of an issue would you say this is down the road?
Yeah, so it's hard to speak with too much specificity because it's all not public. Some of it's classified. Most of it's probably controlled information, so level below formal classification, but not in the public domain. In any case, so I can say that for some things, definitely there are significant challenges with inventory for certain systems. For other systems, less so. But fundamentally, it is all solvable. But solving these problems would have required a lot more action to be taken at the outset. So everything could have been, all these potential problems could have been avoided entirely or heavily mitigated. And there's still things that can be done right now to mitigate them, but there's just still a serious fundamental lack of interest in taking any sort of significant steps towards this. So, for example, the way that the United States has been supporting Ukraine via drawdowns, they've been pulling things out of their pre-positioned stockpiles. That's been one method, and they've been pulling stuff just from war reserves, and in some cases, active duty units as well have had their ammunition supplies cut, and so they're really they're kind of doing things backwards, because I mean, yes, they're always going to need to do some of that, but the United States has a lot of things in storage. So the Patriot battery is a pretty good example of this. The United States has lots of Patriot assets in deep storage, but these are not in usable condition because they're in deep storage, and they've, in most cases probably been sitting there for 30 years since the 90s, because the US Patriot Force was cut significantly in the 90s following the Cold War, and the whole military was cut a lot, but Patriot in particular, US Army Air Defense Artillery, was really cut. So there's all sorts of assets that are in deep storage that could have been refurbished, but there was basically no effort to do this until now. Now they're saying that they're going to do this, but why wasn't that done 2.5 years ago? And the same can be said for all the vehicles that are sitting in Sierra Army Depot in California. There's all sorts of armored vehicles that have been sitting in the desert for very many years. So refurbishing those has been an option since day one, but very little effort has been made to do that. They've been pulling vehicles that are in sort of active use, or they're in they're in pre-positioned stockpiles. They've been sending that stuff when they shouldn't be exclusively relying on that stuff, because once it runs out, then what do you go to? Now you're just in a position where the only thing that is left is all this inoperable equipment that needs to be refurbished. So that was a process that needed to be acted on a long time ago, because if it had, then they wouldn't be in this problem now. They would have all that refurbished equipment refurbished by now, or they could have had a pipeline established where progressively there's a pretty steady stream of that stuff being refurbished and then it can be delivered to Ukraine. So they basically haven't done much of any of that. And also the investments that they've made in expanding production capacity for new munitions is far below what they should be doing. They've obviously put a lot of money into this, but they needed to put a lot more into it because the scope is not big enough, and the speed with which it's been acted on is just not big enough. That they should have put a lot more money into it. They should have had much more ambitious plans. Like for 155, for example, they set a target of 100,000 rounds per month. And realistically, they probably should have done like double that, would have been a more appropriate goal. But they just set very modest objectives at the outset. And now, 2.5 years, almost, we're heading towards 3 years into the war. Now is not a good time to be revising those targets because, if they do, they're going to take another 2-3 years to meet the new target. So these are all things that really needed to be done early on in the spring and in the summer of 2022. They needed to be a lot more ambitious with what they wanted to achieve. But they went really a very conservative, very minimalist approach to all of these problems. So now they are in the position of saying, well, we just don't have that much stuff to send Ukraine anymore because we've sent a lot and our stocks are pretty empty. So we really can't send too much more. And part of that as well is that their requirements are just wrong. They have contingency plans and they're still operating under the assumption that European command might actually have to fight Russia themselves, which is obviously not something they have to worry about right now because Ukraine's fighting the Russians for them. All of NATO doesn't have to worry about Russia so long as Ukraine is fighting Russia. So all of any contingency plans that exist with regard to Russia should have basically been thrown out the window and said, yeah, we can afford to give Ukraine everything that we need for our own contingencies because those contingencies are just not operable. And in the event that Ukraine, gets defeated anyway, they would still have time to rebuild those inventories. But they've taken a very overly cautious, conservative approach to this problem and been unwilling to compromise those operational plans, contingency plans, which has been highly problematic. So yes, there are definitely we're at the level of where there are physical scarcity issues for a lot of key systems, but again, it's an entirely self-created problem that was very easily foreseen, but they just did nothing. Another example of this is the debacle with cluster munitions not being sent for 1.5 years. If Ukraine had been receiving cluster munitions since the beginning of the war, that would have really stretched the available ammunition a lot further because Ukraine was forced to expend a lot more ammunition early on of all the unitary explosive rounds that they were being provided when they could have received DPCEIM instead and been able to fire a lot fewer rounds and achieved better effects. So if you're shooting at a bunch of infantry or vehicles in an open field, one DPCIM round could be, more effective than firing like a dozen M107s, for example. So the amount of ammunition that Ukraine had to expend for a year basically was just vastly inflated by the fact that they were using not the appropriate ammunition for the problem set facing them. So Ukraine's rate of artillery ammunition expenditure would have actually been heavily reduced if they had more options earlier on. So all of these policy decisions have really just exacerbated the problem where stocks were finite, production rates were not obviously what they needed to be, and now we're just having a big confluence of these problems all kind of coming at the same time now, and there's not an easy way to fix that because things take time, obviously. They can't be fixed overnight now that they're finally kind of waking up and realizing that the cupboard is bare and they're running around trying to see how that can be remedied. And it's not something that's going to be remedied in short time. So, sorry, very long-winded answer to your question there, but hopefully that kind of sheds some clarity on the situation for people.
Yeah, I think it was like a lot more specific than I could have hoped for. So I think I appreciate it, right? Like this refurbishment issue is big. And this kind of, like you said, we need to change the calculus of like, we need all this stuff to fight Russia in some European war in the future. No, we can hand at least half of that to Ukraine right now and focus on maybe replenishing it later. But it's pretty obvious that we need to change that calculus. So I think those are two really good takeaways, and then obviously long-term production stuff needs to be resolved, but that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Cool. So I think we can probably go to chat questions unless you have any questions, Erwin.
No, just questions from chat, really. So the first one is from Callan Dunn. Do you know if the third Patriot is a Pack 3? And I know there was some discussion in the chat, but maybe you have some insights.
So I would assume that whatever they are going to pull out of storage would not be in a Pack 3 configuration. So the question is, what will they upgrade it to? And I presume that they will upgrade it to a Pack 3 configuration, upgrade all the software, upgrade all the hardware, do everything that they need to do so that it can fire MSC. But we don't know, is the short answer. But I presume that that's what they will do. But these are all questions that need to be asked. What is their expected lead time to refurbish this Patriot battery that they're going to pull out of storage? And unfortunately, with what's happening in the Middle East, I mean, on an average day at a Pentagon press briefing, over 50% of the questions will be about the Middle East. And with what's happening right now at the press briefing on Friday, probably about 90% of the questions were about the Middle East. So there's like one or two questions that were Ukraine related, and none of them were about the latest security assistance packages, which is very frustrating that nobody has any interest in asking important questions to the Pentagon about these topics. But, I'm beating a dead horse about this. Anybody who follows me knows how much I complain about this, that journalists in America are failing the public by not asking important questions. They would much rather just ask the same stupid question about the Middle East every single day and get the same stupid answer from the Pentagon rather than asking about something important like this. So we don't know right now, and we may not ever know if nobody bothers to ask this question. So hopefully we get some clarity on it in the future. But right now, we don't know.
I mean, there's at least one journalist there that keeps asking the right questions. Alex is really good, but that's just one.
Right. And Alex does not go to the Pentagon, right? He goes to state and he goes to the White House. But Alex is not at the Pentagon. So, on occasion, there are people there that will ask good questions, but it is very rare. The vast majority of them do not. It's extremely rare that you get a good question asked in any of these briefings. Whether it's state, White House, or the Pentagon, it's very rare to have an intelligent question asked.
That's very sad because, even if the media houses might think that, the Middle East is the hottest topic, that's what's going to sell, etc. In my opinion, journalism is also about shaping the landscape of the media and the interest of the people with what you think is actually important. And if you're not doing that as a journalist, I don't think you're really doing your job well. And please, if you are ever in the media room there, maybe take some notes after even these Q&As we have here, and you'll probably get better questions just from the chat, than most of the stuff that is in the Pentagon media room. There was another one for Colby, I think. Yeah. Is there any news about JASM that could hit Russia? So I guess Thierry here is asking, is there any possibility that JASM might be transferred? And also, what is the kind of possible outcomes of lifting the targeting restrictions? I know I interpret it it completely the wrong way, I guess. After Biden basically went out and kind of messaged everyone that we're gonna change up the policy here, and then nothing really happened. What do you think is happening, Colby?
Yeah, I think Zelensky is leaving his meetings in the United States empty-handed on both of these questions. And in fact, something I didn't mention about JSOW is that in President Biden's statement about the latest security assistance decisions that he has made, they're framing JSOW as a long-range capability, which it is most certainly not. There's really no universe in which JSOW, in the context of how Ukraine will be able to employ it, could be considered a long-range capability. But it's one of the White House's many very clever ploys that they've used throughout this war to make it seem like they're doing things when they're actually not doing much at all. Because there were an awful lot of people actually when the JSOW news first broke that confused JSOW with JASM, which is obviously what the White House intended, because they're trying to avoid some of the heat that they've been getting on this pressure, because the pressure obviously has been continuing to mount on them, both from allies and both allies and by an emerging bipartisan consensus in Congress that they need to lift restrictions and provide more long-range fires to Ukraine. So they're really been looking for a way to try and reduce the amount of pressure that they're getting and sort of deflect. So JSOW is their latest ploy to try and make people think that they are doing what is being asked of them when they are actually not. So they've made this JSOW commitment. And, to be clear, I'm happy to see that they're getting JSOW. Again, this is something that should have been done a long time ago. There shouldn't really be any sort of these arbitrary limits on what conventional capabilities are going to be provided to Ukraine. Pretty much all of them should be on the table, essentially, with a few exceptions. But JSOW is not JASM, so JASM is not something that people should expect is going to happen anytime soon. The lifting of long-range strikes is not something. The prohibition on long-range strikes is not something that people should expect anytime soon. It's unclear whether they're even going to let the British and the French, if Ukraine will be able to use Storm Shadow and Scalpy G, but long-range strikes with ATACMS is definitely not on the table still, and. For Storm Shadow and Scalpy G, the relevance of that is rapidly diminished because there are just so few of those missiles left because Ukraine has used an awful lot of them. And the utility of any of these strikes is severely limited if Ukraine can't generate complex raids with them by using multiple different weapon systems in conjunction. So just using Storm Shadow or Scalpy G on their own, or just using ATACMS on their own, is not really that effective. And it's going to continue to be even less effective over time because the Russians have improved their air defense interception rates against all of these missiles. And the only way to mitigate against that is for them to be used in complex raids in conjunction with each other. But that is not really on the table, at least for attacking Russia right now. So it's very annoying, very frustrating, very disheartening, but all people can do is just continue to maintain pressure on this topic because the pressure does have an impact, but the decision-making process has not really developed as rapidly as we would have liked, and it doesn't seem like the president has made a favorable decision on this question yet. So, yeah,
I think there's a lot of people who thought that this is a cruise missile, but it's a glide bomb. I think some of the reason for that is the maximum target distance of 130 kilometers. But the thing is that's when you drop it from the maximum altitude, which is not going to be the case. The Ukraine is not going to be able to fly F-16s and drop them from the maximum altitude. They're going to have to pop up a few thousand feet at maximum and drop them, which is going to lower the range substantially. So I seriously doubt that we're going to see any max range utilization of this weapon.
Yeah, that's correct. And yes, a lot of people did call it a cruise missile, and part of that is Navair's fault because everybody at Navair is, I don't know, severely handicapped or something. They actually describe it as a missile on their website, which again just shows how cooked Navair is, that they can't even correctly describe their own ordnance because it is not a missile. Missile has a actual technical definition in the defense sphere. It's something that has independent propulsion, and there is no independent propulsion on JSOW. It's a glide bomb. It doesn't have an engine or a motor of any kind. It just relies on the transferred energy from the aircraft that's releasing it. Right, so you have an aircraft that's going really fast. You drop the bomb. The bomb, gets transferred some of that kinetic energy, and it can glide through the air. That's my grade 5 physics explanation. People, John can go into it more if people have more questions. But anyway, yeah, it's not a missile; it's a glide bomb. So very limited range in the way that Ukraine will end up using these because it will not be a high-speed, high-altitude release. And again, it's any weapon Ukraine gets is a good thing. Again, glad to see these being provided. It's been something that John and I have been asking about for quite some time, but it's not even at all close to being comparable to JASSM or any other sort of long-range capability. Like this will have less range than Gimler's will. So it's not extending Ukraine's long-range fires. It's just another tool that they can use to hit Russian frontline assets, really. It's not any sort of deep strike weapon.
It's a similar capability to the JDAMs that they already had in the French ASM Hammer weapon. So I think the fact that this weapon is not so well known has confused a lot of people. This is certainly a good capability to have for Ukraine, and probably is going to, as far as I understand, with the F-16s, they're going to have a higher hit rates than not the JASSM, but the JDAMs had initially. So what really confuses me though is that everyone said, yeah, there's no way we're going to see the F-16 being pushed up to do any sort of ground attack missions in the beginning. So that confuses me a little bit. And since I'm not an aviation guy, I would love to hear someone saying that this is a good idea right now.
Yeah, well, there was like one report that emerged that Ukraine may have done sort of more of a frontline combat sortie with F-16s so far. So it very well may have happened, but as John and I have been saying, people should not expect that this is going to be a super common routine thing. And it hasn't been. Like F-16s had been in Ukraine for a little bit, and we saw that, that report did not emerge for a while. So Ukraine was using them very conservatively for defensive counter air. And we saw that they unfortunately lost an F-16, which again, we said that, that was to be expected, that, losses would happen. And because losses are going to happen and Ukraine only has a small number of F-16s right now, they're just going to have to be conservative with them. So, as they get more comfortable, we'll see them start to expand the range of different missions they're going to fly with the F-16s, but they still have to be very conservative with them. And so there's not a massive need for them to take those risks and fly a lot of close air support missions, because they have JDAM and small diameter bomb integrated with their legacy fleet. And I don't see any reason why they couldn't integrate JSOW onto those aircraft as well. So it's not that they have to necessarily use these in conjunction with F-16. They may elect to. They may decide that they don't want to try and get that integration with a legacy aircraft done, but that's certainly something that theoretically should be on the table. And as they get more aircraft in, then they can be more comfortable about undertaking higher risk missions with them to deploy those JSOWs. But ultimately, that problem will, as more aircraft get delivered, then they'll have more freedom of operation with them.
Yeah, there's been rumors that the Dutch or a batch of Dutch aircraft are soon heading to Ukraine. I don't know if you know anything more about that, but they had this farewell ceremony in very conveniently in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I saw something about that, but I don't have any details about when Ukraine should expect more and how many. I don't have any insight really into that beyond what might get reported in the media.
Yeah. There's a question about the current Patriot fire units. Are they all PAC-3 capable?
All the American ones are MSE capable. The German ones are PAC-3 capable, but may or may not be MSE capable. So that's not 100% certain. But all the American ones can fire MSE for sure, and the German ones may or may not be able to, because the MSE upgrades were in progress, as I understand it. And I'm not sure if they were all completed or not when Germany began donating their own Patriot batteries to Ukraine. Okay, Murray says Murray says it's still underway, which was my understanding that they were still underway. I don't know if the ones that Ukraine got had been completed yet, but as I understand it, it's those upgrades are still happening. So the safe thing to say is that they are capable of firing PAC-3 and PAC-3 CRA, but may not be capable of firing MSE.
They won't be able to fire MSE missiles because we always delivered an older system when we got the newer one, which already got the MSE upgrade basically from the industry. So yeah, just what you said, everything was fine.